All right. So a few years ago, as I explained, guys, I made the video walking through step by step an introductory video of how to make an app in Thunkable, even if you had never done one before. And now, just 3 years later, it's kind of irrelevant because some of the stuff that we had, some of the blocks that we had used have changed, and Thunkable's changed a little bit. So I wanted to make sure to update you guys, and that way, if you were to make this project and follow along, you not be super confused because things are in a little bit different location. Now, many of you are using Chromebooks. I am using a Mac right now, so the way my screen looks might look a little different on yours. So just recognize that. My screen might look a little different. Some of the blocks that I have, which you'll understand in a second, might look a little different too. So right here, I have all these projects and things that I had used before. Don't worry about that. You're going to click on Create New Project up here in the top right corner. Okay, so that blue button that says Create New Project, you're going to go ahead and click that. I'm going to click on the tutorial. Okay, just because that's one I already created. Now, if you ever need to add a screen, if you already show up and there's a screen up there, great. But if for some reason yours shows up and there's not a screen, I'm going to click this plus button. But if you already have a screen, don't click it. And this adds a screen that shows up on here. Now, a few things. One, recognize that when you first see this, it might be a little overwhelming because whenever you see something new, you might not know where things are. And that's perfectly okay because I'm going to walk through the basics of what you're going to need to know. Okay. So first, what do you see? On the left-hand side, well, I guess first starting off in the center, this is what your app screen would look like, right? It's kind of in the shape of a phone there. So eventually, we're going to design this to make it look nice. On the left, up in the top left corner over here, see how it says screen 1? If you had multiple screens, you could toggle between those screens and see. Like if I were to click on this plus button right here, see how it adds screen 2? And then up in the top left corner, I now have two screens, screen 1 and screen 2. Right now, like that would be like, imagine you're creating an app and you click something and it moves to the next screen. You could do that. But we're not going to need screen 2 in this actual project. So right there, notice there's a trash can next to it. It says delete. I'm going to go ahead and click it. So screen 2 is gone. If I ever wanted to rename my screen, right, I could go ahead and click up here in the app settings. I'm sorry. I'm mistaken there. You could go ahead and click in here where it says screen 1 and then go over here to the right-hand side and click on that button to rename the screen. You could also delete the screen if you wanted to by clicking the trash can. But right now we're going to focus on the left-hand side. Okay. Now, how do you make things show up on the screen? Well, down below, this is my drawer of components. And a component is just something that would show up on the screen. So the first thing that shows up for me, it might not be for you, but the first thing that shows up for me is a button. Right? All of you guys know what buttons are. You click buttons in apps all the time. There are labels, text inputs. I'm going to explain those three because those are the three most basic. But you could scroll down, and some of these components might not show up for you and only show up on non-Chromebook computers. But like if I wanted to access my phone's camera, if I wanted to access images within the phone, if I wanted to store things in a database, if I wanted to use Google Maps in my app, if I wanted to use the GPS in an app, I could use all of these things. And it's as simple as if I wanted to share on social media, if I want to add monetization to my app. Okay. How would you make these show up? Well, it's pretty simple. Let's say I drag a button because we all know what a button is. I'm going to click on the button and hold it and drag it and drop it right onto my screen in the middle right here. Okay, so I picked up a button and I dragged it and dropped it. And I'm going to do the same with a second button, right? If I drag it, hold the button, drag it, and drop it in the middle, this middle area now shows two buttons. Okay, now if you click on the first button that I made, it says the name for that is button 1. The second button is button 2. So let's say for button 2, I just go ahead and want to delete it. I could delete it right here up in the top left corner, or I could delete it with this trash can over here. Let's say you accidentally drag too many buttons on the screen. It's as simple as just clicking the trash can. It asks you, are you sure you want to delete the button? I'm going to say yes. I don't need button 2. I only need one button. Okay. So we have our drawers over here, our components drawer, that is. We have our phone screen here in the middle that I'm going to drag things to. And on the right, these are all of my properties. Okay, so if I click on something, if I click on the button, on button 1, notice in the top left corner here, I have screen 1 and button 1. If I click on each, notice that on the right-hand side of the screen, it changes the properties of the screen. So like for screen 1, if I wanted to change the background color on the screen, I have to click on screen 1 first. Then I go over here where it says background color, click on it, and I can find the exact RGB for it, make it look nice, or I could click one of these pre-selected colors. You can click whatever you want, whatever color you want the background to be. I'm just going to click that. You can click whatever color you want. Where did I find that? I clicked on screen 1 and then looked at the background color. You could move this, and this changes the background color of your app. Okay, what do you think? Could we sell this on the App Store yet? No. Probably not, right? I mean, maybe. What if you were just like a really popular person and just say, hey, come download my app from the App Store, 99 cents, right? It doesn't do anything though. Check this out. Just in screen 1, if I wanted to add a background picture, I could. If I wanted to change the alignment, if I wanted to make my screen scrollable, which means I could scroll up, right? Continue to scroll, and the screen scrolls, everything you see going down, down. Just like in social media apps, how you're able to scroll. If I were to click this button right here, this makes my app scrollable. Pretty easy, right? You don't have to add a bunch of code. It's just already here for you. A lot of these things, you don't have to know. I'm not going to go through all of that. I'm just going to go through the basics. Now, if you want to learn a little bit more, you're more than welcome to. But I'm just going to show you the basics for today. Okay, so if I click on button 1 and realize where my cursor is right here, it's in the top left corner. If I click on button 1, notice now I can change different properties about the button. So I have my drawer of components. Okay, I have all the components I've added to the app up here. I have what actually shows up on my phone, and then I have the properties. Okay, if I were to ask you to describe someone, you would list different properties about them, right? Now, with that, the same with a component, a button here, I probably don't want my button to say button, right? Maybe instead of button, I make it say, like, click me, right? Maybe that's what I have it say. Or maybe I have it say submit. I don't care what your button says as long as it's appropriate. And let's say I don't want it named button 1, right? Button 1 seems just too generic. If I want to rename it, see that pencil right there in the top right corner? I'm going to click on rename. I'm going to click on my button. And I'm just going to name it submit button, all one word. Okay, the reason why is the more spaces you add, and especially in programming in general, it's harder to keep track of when you have a bunch of spaces. So what I'm using here is called camel case, right? So every time you have a new letter, or sorry, a new word, the first letter is capitalized. So submit button. Now the text submit currently is white. I want to keep it white. Font size, you can change the font size. The background color, I think the background color is too close to the app background color. Do you agree? So maybe let's change it. I can click on it. I don't know, maybe I'm just going to make mine green. You can make yours any color you want. Putting a background picture on a button's a little too much. I'm not going to do that, right? But these are some other properties. You could change the height, the size of your button, the width of your button. If it's visible, check this out. You can make a button that's not visible. Why would you need a button that's not visible?
If it's a trick button.
Well, okay, if it's a trick button, okay. But what if you just don't want it to show up on the screen yet? What if you only want it to show up after the user has entered in certain information, right? Because you don't want them to submit something too early. Okay. So maybe we eventually add some programming to make it show up. I'm going to make mine visible to start. Right? We can change the margin. The padding is like like the spacing between the buttons. You can change that if you want. I'm not going to change any of that. But if you want to change the bold, right? You can make it bold. If you want to make it italic, look what raise does. It like makes it so it's like kind of like 3D. If you want to make it disabled, which means you can't click it, I'm not going to make mine disabled. I'm just going to, I'm going to make it bold, the font bold. But you can scroll through and play with it. I'm not going to go on that. It actually has even more advanced things you could do with a button, right? I'm not going to play with that. I think that's for a future lesson. But right now, we dragged a button. Now, I showed you how we could drag multiple buttons to the screen. But let's say also, I want to drag a label. So look in your drawer over here, right? Your components. Notice we have, for me, mine might look different from yours, but I have a bunch of drawers. I have in my components, I have a user interface drawer, a layout, a voice, image, data, location, sensors, social, authentication, monetization. I've got all these drawers I can click on. But the number one thing we're going to mention here are buttons, labels, and text input. And everyone should have that. So I'm going to drag a label. I'm going to click on the label, drag it on my screen, and I'm going to drop it on there. Now, let's say you just dragged it and dropped it accidentally like below the submit button. What you can do is look up here in the top left corner, right? What you can do is you can pick up, I can like click on the label, hold it, and drag it down below the button up here. So this is the order of things. If it says button label 1, then maybe we want our label above it. I'd click on the label, drag it above, and put it right there. Sometimes you might try dragging and dropping over here and it work, but sometimes it won't. Sometimes it's a little harder to drag and drop over here. But you can drag and drop in the middle too. As you see, I can change the order of them over here. Sometimes it's hard and you might drag and drop it to the wrong spot on the screen. So what's a label? A label is text that you can't really do anything about. The label kind of tells you what to do. So up in the top left corner, click on label 1. And this will allow me to edit the properties of the label on the right-hand side of the screen, right? So I'm going to change the name of this label. I'm going to rename it to, I'll say I'll call this enter name label. I'll eventually explain the difference between a label and a text input, but I want to name mine. I'm just naming mine enter name label. And the text for the label is going to say enter your name. And then I'm going to put a colon there. Now, if I wanted to change the font size, I don't know if I made it like 24, it looks a little bigger. You don't have to. If I wanted to change the line height, the color, maybe I don't want black there. Maybe, I don't know. Maybe I choose like a dark gray. Entirely up to you. You can edit however you want. I could change the background color of the label, but I really don't want to do that. So mine says enter your name. Now the thing is, a label doesn't allow you to edit it. A label just is text that shows up on the screen. In the same way, check this out. If I have like up here, well, I guess that's more of a picture. Let me find a good example here. Okay, so background picture. See how it says background picture over here or background color? If I wanted to change where it says background picture, if I wanted to change that to say background pic, do you think Thunkable would allow me to change that? Probably not. I'm not allowed to change it. Can I change vertical alignment to V alignment? No, it won't let me. So that's what a label is. A label is just shows up and doesn't allow me to edit it. But a text input receives input from the user. So I'm going to drag a text input. You see on the left-hand side of the screen, I have a text input, drag it, and I'm going to try and drop it right between my label and my button. Okay. So I have a text input that I dragged over here. And also notice that its properties are over here. So I'm going to go ahead and rename this. I'm going to rename this to, I'll say name input. This is just what I'm choosing. I could name it whatever I wanted. I'm just choosing that. Now, what's the hint? The hint is just what shows up, but like isn't actually like there. Just type here. I'm going to just take out the hint to not confuse you. And I'm going to leave the text blank. So on my screen, I have a preview. I also have a live test. Does yours say web preview or something like that? Do you have a preview button? Yes or no? Do you have, what's that? Web preview, yeah, right? Mine says preview. I also have live test. You can click either one. If I click preview, this previews what your app would look like. So if I click on enter your name, will it let me enter that? Like actually, sorry, will it let me edit that? Can I edit enter your name? No, why not? Because it's a label. Now click below it in my text input. Can I type into my text input? Yeah, I can. So what's the difference between a label and a text input? Okay, a label does not allow you to change it, but a text input, let's say I already changed this to say like enter your password, and then you type in your password and then click on the submit button. Now, have I told the computer or told this app what to do when submit is clicked? No, I haven't. So nothing really happens. But we've started this and eventually something will happen. Okay. So there's my button. This is my label up here. This is my text input in the middle. And this is my button. These are the three most common components in all of app development. Maybe picture is also important, right? But check this out. Let's look around. Just look around on this site, right? This is a button. This is a button. This is a button. I'm sorry, this is a button. Button, 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 button. What if I click inside hint right there? What is that? That's a text input. What is hint? A label. What is height? If I click inside here with keyboard type, this is not a text input. This is a drop down, right? But in here, inside text, that's a text input. So knowing the difference between a button, a label, and a text input is important. In Python, they call it an entry and not a text input, which we'll get into later. But so check this out. Let's add one more label. And I'm going to drag it and I'm going to drop it down. But notice how it showed up, like it dropped at the top. I'm going to pick it up and drag it below the button. Below the button. Below the button. I'm having trouble. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to the top left-hand corner and I'm going to drag it and drop it below the button up there. When in doubt, use the top left-hand corner. As I mentioned, the more components that you add to your screen, the harder it gets to control them. Okay. So label 1, okay. I'm going to change the name from label 1 up here in the top right corner. I'm going to change the name to answer label. Okay. That's just what I decide to name it. And I'm also going to remove all the text so it's blank. Now, you can't see the label. Is it gone? No, because if I were to type stuff in it, it would show up again. It's there. You just can't see it. Because I can tell it's still there because it's in my list up in the top left-hand corner. Now, let's say I want to actually program it and make something happen. We've designed it. Look up here in the top left corner. We've been designing the app the entire time. Now we need to add functionality to it. We got to make it do something. So what I do is click on blocks. All right, now your app didn't disappear. Some people say, Mr. Danza, my entire app disappeared. I can't find it. No, it's right there. So design shows your app. The blocks make something happen. Okay, so let me give you the idea of what I want my app to do. Here's what I want to happen. I want to, it says enter your name. I want you to be able to enter your name, click submit, and in that last label, I want it to show up, the answer label. I want to say, hi, Mr. Danza, and then to clear out any text that I entered. Okay, so I want this to pop up and say enter your name, and you can say, I don't know, John, and click submit, and then for it to say, hi, John. All right, that's the app I want to make. It's going to make millions of dollars, right? If you ever want to go back to edit, notice up here in the top right corner, it says edit. I can click preview, edit. I can toggle between them. But I'm going to go to blocks because we're going to make something happen. So let's think. What action is the most important action here? Like what actually, when this action happens, something happens in my app? Yes. Control. Okay. So you're looking, I'm thinking in my components, right? When does the magic happen and hi, Mr. Danza show up? When I click the button. Look down at the bottom of the screen here on the left-hand side. Okay. Yours might look a little different. Does yours look a little different? Okay. Is there one that says like components? UI components, right? That's where it would be. But can you find submit button? Do you guys see submit button? I'm going to click on Submit button. Check this out. These are other drawers that exist that I can pull these potential blocks out of. Some of you used Scratch before. It's similar to that. Look at the very top one. It says when the Submit button is clicked. The very top one. I want you to drag that out and drop it on your screen. So when the Submit button is clicked, what do we want to change? Do we want our enter name label? Do we want our text input, whatever we called it? What was something input? Name input label or name input? Or do we want the answer label to edit? What do we want to happen? We want to go down to our answer label. And we're going to set, see it says set answer labels text. Remember right now the text is blank, right? So I'm going to drag the second block down. It says set answer labels text. I'm going to drag it. And you see where it like fits right in there? You like drag it in, it turns gray. And I'm going to drop it in there. Has to be dropped inside of the block. So I'm going to set the text to and I'm going to come over here in my drawers on the left, and I'm going to click on text. Notice there's this block that says join. I'm going to drag this join together, and I'm going to drop it right at the end of text. So it looks like this. So set answer labels text to, instead of lowercase hello, I'm going to make it hello space. And you see where it says world right here? I'm going to drag this. And you see this trash can down at the bottom down here? I'm going to drag it and drop it right in that trash can. What do we want it to say, though? The person's name. Where was the name? No. Where was the name? Was it in the enter name label? Was it in the name input? It was in the name input, right? That's where they typed it. So I'm going to click in name input. And I'm going to scroll down to where I have name inputs text, right? Wouldn't that make sense? Whatever the user typed in. And I'm going to take name input text, drag it, drop it right there. Now, the last thing I want to do is, well, I guess let's test it. Let's test it. Go back to design and click on preview. Enter your name, Mr. Danza. I click submit. Hello, Mr. Danza. Pretty sweet, right? Now, look at the text input. Wouldn't it be annoying? All right, guys, listen up, listen up. Wouldn't it be annoying to have to then backspace this each time and say like, I don't know, Josh? Wouldn't it be annoying to backspace it each time? So let's go ahead and do one last thing. I'm going to go to blocks. I'm going to go to name input. And I'm going to drag set name inputs text. I'm going to drag it to here. So what this will do is after it says, hello, Mr. Danza, I'm then going to take the name input and clear it out so it's blank again. So here's what my final program looks. I'm going to click in the design, move to design so I can see it. I'm going to click on preview, enter your name. I'm going to say Mr. Danza. I click submit, and it says, hello, Mr. Danza. If I want to say Robbie, enter your name, Robbie. Hello, Robbie. Pretty cool, right? Now, this is a very easy, primitive app. You may have thought there's no way that I could make my own app. But guess what? Right now, you could put this on the App Store if you wanted. You could put this on the Google Play Store if you wanted. Would anyone buy it? Maybe your parents, right? Be like, hey, if I told you I could make an app and put it on the App Store, would you pay me? Right? And maybe they will. But there's tons of things we can use in Thunkable, tons of great components. Now, it's not the most sophisticated, but it's the easiest way to start. And I highly recommend anyone interested in app development starting with Thunkable.